You guys ready to see an amazing review of the Fujifilm 16-55? Because this lens, by golly, has become my favorite lens in the Fujifilm system. Let's rock this. Okay, so let's get going with this little review. My lens reviews can be really long because I just kind of want to hit everything. And all my reviews are always based on what I am looking for or what matters to me, and I just share it. So if a lot of this stuff doesn't matter to you, then if it does, then cool. So I haven't did a video in a while. Make sure everything's good. Let's go over the build quality. Now, I'm not going to pick up a lot of what everybody else says because this has been out for a while now and people has reviewed it like crazy. But just my my look upon this lens is it's very, very nice. I mean, it is one solid feeling lens, rubber gasket, so you got that weather resistant. So if you're using it on XT3 or XH1, like I've got right here. And by the way, I'm filming on the XT3. This lens will, help the weather sealing and all that. But yeah, it's a really good lens. Out of all the Fujifilm lens that I had now, man, what was it, like maybe almost 20 now? Quite a bit. This one's probably one of the better lens caps because all the other ones, man, they just don't go on straight and all this. And like if you just put it off like a little bit, you can find it really easy like that. The other ones they go on crooked and they feel cheap. So the lens hood on this one, I wish they would make all of them like this. It feels pretty good. So yeah, is it heavy? Yeah, it's heavy in the sense of, these smaller Fujifilm lenses, but in reality, as far as maybe full frame, and I know this isn't full frame, but you're getting a lot of glass, and if you're going to get really good optics, they have to be big and heavy. That's just about it. So we're going to go through a few tests and just show you how I think this is. And let's just go to the first one. Here's chromatic aberration. If we just zoom in, I just shot up in the sky, and as you can see, basically there is none. That's how good this lens is. I mean, I just looked all over this place, and it was getting cloudy. I was hoping it was a little brighter, but nonetheless, there is none in here. I try to shoot at the brightest part of the sky. And other reviewers, they find the same thing when they do their tests. They just don't see any. And here's just another. That was at 55 millimeters, and this is at 24 millimeters. And there is just no chromatic aberration. Again, this isn't the brightest sky here, and I wanted to do these tests really quick, but I already saw reviews, and they were just fine. This is what the bokeh balls look like. I think this was shot at. Let's see, at 55 millimeters at 2.8, and I only did just one because if you're going to shoot portraits or you want bokeh, of course you're going to zoom in and shoot it wide open, and that is really good looking bokeh balls there. They're almost perfectly circle. There's a little bit of onion ringing or whatever they call that in there, just a little bit though, as you can see there. Nothing that completely bothers me. I'm not one of these people who are real picky about bokeh, but I do like when they're round. And don't let these fool you. These are just two bokeh balls on top of each other, make it look like a cat eye or football shape. But they are round, and that is some beautiful bokeh that this lens puts out. At 16 millimeter at f2.8, I was curious: is it worth keeping the 16 millimeter f1.4 prime lens? Now, if you're low light shooter, natural light, more light's always better. For me, I don't find myself too much into low light, nothing that an f2.8 can't do. And shooting models with the IBIS and the XH1, I can slow the shutter down, tell the model not to move, so I can get pretty good low light performance from this. If not, I use a flash. But besides that low light, how is that Fujifilm 16mm f1.4 compared to this, and what do I think? Well, first of all, one thing we know about that is you can get really a close focus, which was really cool. So if you have an object, you can get really close and fill the frame up with the 16 millimeter f1.4 prime lens. Well, so I wanted to see, am I losing out using this? And so I took a shot right here. Let's switch for you guys. This right here is as close as I can get to a quarter with the 16 to 55 millimeter. I actually have this at 16 millimeters, so that's as close as you can get on that. Now, if I show you the 16 millimeter prime lens, that's how close I can get. Now, there's a shadow in there because I'm not trying to be all like super quality photo here, but that's as close as I can get with the prime. So you can see if you're shooting small objects, then the prime is better. But you're not going to use that wide lens to do like jewelry photography and stuff like that. I mean, in a pinch, if you're doing a wedding and you only have that prime lens, well, you can get a decent shot, I guess, but it's not ideal if you're just doing, you know, close-up shots like this all the time, because 16 millimeters is quite wide and it gets a pretty weird perspective on your product or whatever you're shooting. So, you know, if you put like a diamond ring here, that diamond's going to look bigger than it really is. So not something I would use, but that's that. But when it comes to like, let me show you this one. When it comes to like product photography, now this is the Viltrox lens, so if you have that lens, you kind of get an idea of how large this is. That is about the size of a coffee cup, I would say. So if you have the 16 to 55 millimeter lens and you are out on town with the wife or whatever, at 16 millimeters, that's how close you can get to this, to, you know, a coffee cup size image or whatever. And if we come over to this, make sure I got this right. This is the 16 millimeter prime lens, and you can see you can get much closer. So there's the prime, and there's the 16 to 55. So there is quite a large difference. But the cool thing about the 16 to 55 millimeter is you can zoom into 55 millimeters and get, and get this close. So that is pretty cool. Now, let's just make sure I'm right. Yeah, so at 55 millimeters, that's as close as you can get. So you could fill up. I mean, if you're doing product photography, this lens could work really, really good because you can fill up a coffee cup in here. And if you're filming a beer bottle or wine or anything of a coffee cup size, this is now the Fujifilm 90 millimeter, which is almost the same size as that Viltrox. And you could just see that you could do beautiful product photography with this lens by just zooming into 55 millimeters, and you can get that close. And look at the perspective difference. Now, I do have a lot of blur going on here. I'll probably get shot at f2.8. But look at the difference now from the 16 millimeter. You know, this doesn't look too good. If you're doing a product photography, you don't want it to be bulging like this. So in my opinion, the close focus distance for the 16 millimeter isn't really helpful for me because I would rather have the product look like it's supposed to, like in this image, whereas the other one's more bulging. You can get cool shots like this if you're at a coffee shop with the 16, because then you can stop down and get more in focus if you want. And so if you're shooting this at a coffee shop, you can see the people, you know, in the background working or standing in line or something like that, or people talking. So you can kind of get cool, but nonetheless, I would choose the 16 to 55 millimeter zoomed in for any product shot or anything that's the size of a mug. If it's anything smaller like a quarter or a ring or something like that, I wouldn't be using that 16 millimeter prime. I would go into macro or get extension tubes for this lens right here. It's sharp. So there you go on the close focus. Let's go to the next test. Okay, so now this next test is kind of strange. It's an ISO test. It's like an ISO test. That's just because I was trying to find out, do I need to keep that 16 millimeter prime lens at f1.4 if I have 16 millimeters here? And that's why I did some of these tests. And so that is, you know, that prime lens is an f1.4. This is an f2.8. So you might think, well, having that f1.4 would be good in low light. Well, so I just wanted to shoot some my sloppy desk here to see what that would give me. And if we look at it, we can see that this is the 16 millimeter wide open at f1.4, so we're wide open trying to get as much light as we can, and we're shooting at 100th of a second, and that would be good. I mean, I shot his weddings as low as 60th of a second in slow moving people shots type of thing, like during the when they're giving their vows together and all that stuff. 60th of a second could work. 100 you feel a little safer with. So let's say that would be the setup for a low light type of shot. And this was pretty low light. I had to increase the ISO to 400. So even though we're wide open at f1.4 and a pretty slow shutter speed at 100th of a second, you know, for moving people, we're still at ISO 400. So what does that mean when we 16 millimeter, and I put it at 2.8 like this lens, like the zoom lens would be, and still at 100th of a second. So if you're kind of shooting slow-paced people, but you want to try to minimize the motion blur, now what we'd have to do by just increasing the ISO, we had to go to 1600. So, you know, at f1.4 with the same settings, we were shooting at 400 ISO, but just by increasing this to f2.8, we had to increase the ISO to 1600 if we wanted to keep a safe shutter speed for, you know, fairly slowish moving people. So the next shot, this one here is at 16 millimeters. This is still the prime. I didn't have this lens with me when I did this shot. I had it in my bag and I didn't want to go get it. And I said, you know, let's just switch the aperture. It's going to be the same thing as far as ISO increases and all that stuff. But anyways, at 2.8, as if you had the zoom lens on at 16 millimeters, whatever. If you wanted to increase that ISO and get the same performance from that prime lens and decrease the ISO back down to 400, well, at f2.8, you would have to slow your shutter all the way down to 25th of a second, which is way too slow for moving people. People are going to be blurry if they're moving around. Now, if you're shooting a model, of course, just tell them to stand still. But if you're in a low light situation, natural light, and you have the zoom lens at f2.8, and you wanted to try to get as much same ISO or clean images as that prime lens, you would have to go way down to 25th. So it wouldn't quite work out the same. So the prime would be good for the situation. If we go to the next shot here, file info. So I just wanted to see, like at f2.8 is if I had the zoom lens on, how slow of a shutter would I need to go to have a base clean ISO of 200, and I had to go all the way down to 13th of a second. So 13th of a second is really slow. We're talking that's like, you know, motion blur city. So weird test, I know, but I just want to see at f2.8 at a base ISO of 200, what would my shutter speed be? All the way down to 13th of a second, which is really, really slow. And then basically what it comes down to is this shot here. Again, you're looking at the ones from the prime, but I was just doing the ISO and aperture changes just to see what it would be, because it would be the same if by changing that. We're not looking at image quality, just what you would expect with an f2.8 opposed to an f1.4. But if you wanted to capture a beautiful lit image at f2.8 in low light, you can increase your shutter speed all the way up to 250th of a second, so you're going to probably get no motion blur in normal, even fairly active people, and still have a base ISO of 200 by just using a flash. So, you know, what's the bottom line of this test? It's kind of weird, but I just wanted to know if I'm going to give up my f1.4 16mm prime and just keep this, what can I expect as far as, you know, losing that f1.4 as far as light gathering capabilities? Well, you could see that if you're on the XH1 with image stabilization inside the IBIS, then you could shoot at 25th of a second. Which one was that? Let's see. Let's see which one that was. Yeah, at 25th of a second, at f2.8, you'd be at ISO 400. So the ISO is starting to go up, and that 25th of a second is really slow. But with IBIS, and if you're shooting a model, then this could be used. So keep that in mind if you decide that you wanted to, you know, get this over the prime or get rid of your prime to get this. If you're shooting in natural light, just use a flash, because everything's going to look better anyways, no matter if you're at f1.4 or 2.8, you can shoot at ISO 200 and get beautiful images. Okay, next test. One thing I forgot to add as I was editing this, if you're like me and was wondering if it's even worth keeping the 16mm prime over that of the 16 to 55mm, unless you're doing that low light and you don't use flash type of situation, this is what I found out too. Now, this is not my shot. I just seen this from someone else's video. And I would like to put their name in the link, but I forget. I took a quick screenshot of it while researching these lenses. But you're going to see the one on the left is the 16 to 55 millimeter at 16 millimeters, and the one on the right is the 16 millimeter prime. And you're going to notice that the zoom lens at 16 millimeter is actually wider than the prime lens. So that's just another plus and another reason why I don't have the prime lens anymore. Is this is just so much more useful for my type of work. I don't need the f1.4. I don't need that close focus distance, and it's actually wider. So as you can see, the left side is about the same as we can see here, but if you look at the right, you can see this much more space over here, whereas over here it's almost like this space here on the 16 to 55 millimeter. It's about half of that, just on the side, not the whole image, of course. So you're actually getting a wider field of view on the zoom lens. So thought I would add that in there. So this next test is portraiture, because I do predominantly fashion portrait type work. I do my fair share of videos, and I'm shooting people with that too. So I wanted to know, can this be good? Of course, we're going to zoom in to 55 millimeters wide open. What would the portrait quality be from this lens? Now, I do shoot at f2.8. Sometimes I shoot faster if I have a prime lens with me, but most of the time I like both eyes in focus. That's just a personal choice. So shooting on a crop sensor at f2.8 at 55 millimeters, all depending on how far I am from the subject, but most of the time I'm getting the whole face in focus, which I like personally. When I'm doing magazine shoots, like I still have this from another video I did. I did a magazine shoot. This is my photo here. I did a bunch in here. I did this with the full frame Sony camera. There's more. I showed this on another video. I need to get her jewelry, because there's, people who want to display their jewelry in the magazine, and that's like they're selling their jewelry here. And along with the clothing, in this case, it's a wedding dresses. They really want me to get all that in focus, because if I was just focusing on her eye and all their detail and their rings and everything's blurry that we're trying to sell in the magazine, they'll be really upset with me. So most of the time I'm shooting those at f5.6, full frame equivalent, all the way to an f8. So on here, if I'm going to go right into that, I'll probably just put this at an f4 and shoot the whole shoot like that, because what is that, an f6 or something like that on full frame equivalent. So I would just put this at f4 and I would shoot everything, and everything will be in focus. And because it's f2.8 and you're stopping down, it gets a teeny bit sharper. Okay, so what we're going to show you now is portraits, and I just shot a couple portraits with this while I was on a trip to Dominican Republic, and this is my wife. She models for me a lot. We do stuff for personal stuff too, along with other advertisements and stuff like this. But this was just all personal shoots here. And this was at, let's see what the actual thing is here. This was at 100th of a second, so we're down in that 100th of a second at f2.8 wide open at 48 millimeters. And you can see that was ISO 200. So we were outside. A lot of people don't understand low light really, because we were outside. And even being outside, even being wide open at f2.8, in order to shoot a nice clean 200 ISO without using flash, I didn't use flash for any of these, I had to still shoot at a slow 100th of a second, which is good. She's not going to have too much motion blur. I have IBIS in the XH1, and I just tell her don't move and no problems. But think about that, f2.8 in the daylight. Now, granted, we were like underneath trees and stuff. We're still shooting at 100th of a second, so it's kind of slow. But anyways, in my opinion, this background is blurry enough for me. I know some people don't like that. If you really have to have blurry backgrounds, then get f1.4, f1.2 lenses. So here's just another shot. We're actually up here really high, and I wanted to really try to get this scenery in. We couldn't get any closer here. And now this is at 47 millimeters. So this isn't all the way, zoomed out or anything like that, but that's at f2.8 wide open. And you can see that that's really far back there, and it's not completely blown out. It is a full body shot. But for me, I like this. I don't like to completely blow out my backgrounds. I want you to see that back there. You know, that's the whole point on where we go to. When we go to locations, we always color coordinate her and with the surroundings, or we go to beautiful places and we want to see those things. I don't want to just blow it out into smithereens. And you can see here, we're at ISO 100. Now, I don't know why I had my XH1 on that because that's not a base ISO. Must have screwed something up there, but anyways, oops. Got a few more here. So this one here, now this is one thing really nice about having the zoom lens. You know, I can just, you know, zoom right out to 28 millimeters. This is at f5.6 because I didn't need to blur anything here. So f5.6, I focused on her face. We're at 250th of a second at the base ISO of 200. So we're getting really clean image, get nice sharp image, and we're at 2.8, and it just worked beautiful. This shot here is now inside where that last one you just saw was stairs that went up here. Then we came inside here, and now look at this setting. This is where I'm talking about. Now, this was a lot. There's a pretty good amount of light coming in here. It was pretty well lit. I'm not going to go over how I shot this, but it was pretty well lit, and zoomed in at 55 millimeters, wide open, at 200 ISO to get the cleanest base ISO. I'm shooting at 20th of a second. That's really slow. You wouldn't think that something with this much light coming in here that you'd be shooting at 200th of a second, 20th of a second. That's really slow. But because of the XH1 having IBIS, and that's why I really like the pairing with the XH1 and this zoom lens, is I'm getting image stabilization. And this thing, you know, the image got just tack sharp. Oops, I don't know how to do this thing. Whatever. It got really nice and sharp being at f2 point because she's way over there and I just focused on her. And looks great, 20th of a second, kind of slow, but it works. Okay, next one. So here I went on this side of the wall, had her look out, focused on her, and you could see a lot out there. That's I focused on here. Now, I manually focused on her because it kept focusing on here, so she got a little soft because even though I manual focus, I must have focused on here. But here we are at 33 millimeters, and that's why you don't see the background really blurry, but I wanted to see out there. I didn't want to just blur that out. That's a creative choice. If I wanted to blur that out more, I would have zoomed in at 55 millimeters and stepped back probably. Even then, at f2.8, you might not get that much blur. This was just outside of this building, and just, what was we at? f2.8. This is at 16 millimeters, so you can kind of get an idea, you know, pretty wide. I mean, you know, that's a 24 millimeter full frame equivalent, so it's pretty wide. I don't think I ever need really more than 24 millimeters. Here's just like a kind of a closer up shot, and this is at 55 millimeters. Now see, I stopped down to f5.6. Why? Because there wasn't really nothing to blur in the background. And at f5.6, she's going to be really nice and sharp. And by doing that, though, I had to shoot at that 20th of a second again. But my base ISO is 200. And with the image stabilization, I told her not to move, and it just gets tack sharp. So everything's beautifully sharp on the lens, and it just works really, really good for portraits, in my opinion. If you're someone who just needs if you're someone who just wants to focus on this eye and the whole 90% of the photo is in blur, then go for it. But nice and sharp, and I love that. What else we got here? These are just some wide shots. Let's go to file info. So this is at 80th of a second at that same 5.6. You kind of see that I try to keep the lowest ISO I can all the time. And if I'm shooting a non-moving subject like a model, it's easy just to slow that down with that IBIS. And f5.6, 32 millimeters, and you get a nice shot like that. And one more, this is the same settings as the last one. I just posed her different and shot that right there. Okay, so you see portraits. Didn't do a whole lot of portraits yet with this combination because I used other lenses too, but with this specific one, and it worked perfect for me. I mean, just like when I had my Sony a7 III, I had the Tamron 28 to 75, and I used that for all of these. Actually, 28 to 75 is all I had on this photo shoot, and it worked out beautiful. So this is giving you more. You're getting 24 millimeters and 84 millimeters zoomed out. So that's only 1 millimeter under that, you know, famous 85 millimeter focal length. So good. Let's go to the next test. This next test is going to be a sharpness test. Now this can take kind of a while because I just randomly, let's see what lenses I used. Or tested against. We're going to test all these lenses against the 16 to 55 millimeter f2.8, the one I'm reviewing, and we're going to test it at 16 millimeters at wide open 2.8 and at f5.6. Then we're going to test it at 35 millimeters at f2.8 and f5.6, and then zoomed all the way into 55 millimeters, wide open at f2.8 and f5.6. I'm doing that so we can just see at how soft it is wide open and how much sharper it can get at 55. And we're going to compare that with the 16 millimeter f1.4 prime lens and what else did I do? The 18 to 55. That's this, because I know a lot of people are going to want to know how good this is compared to that. And then we're also going to compare it with I'm using it to film myself. 35 millimeter f1.4, and then the 56 millimeter f1.2, and the Viltrox 85 millimeter. And these are just random lenses. I just wanted to see at a ballpark on where this 16 to 55 goes. So let's look over on my little thing here. Now what we're looking at here is this top one is going to be the prime lens. So this is the 16 millimeter at f1.4 wide open. We're just going to see what it looks like compared to the 16 to 55 millimeter wide open at f2.8. This is just for shits and giggles, so let's see what it looks like in the corner. So if we move this over, and you can see that this prime lens right here is actually sharper at f1.4 than it is with the zoom lens at 16 millimeter at f2.8. So you can see that the prime lens is sharper in the corners, which is pretty cool. Kind of soft on there, but it's wide open, which is amazing. You can see that 4.3 here is a little sharper. So yeah, it's now if we look down here, this the zoom is looking a little sharper now than over here, and we can see chromatic aberration now, which I didn't see. It pops up very rarely, but this is the zoom, and you can see that this is actually kind of sharper now in that area. If we look down here, if we look at the DE and the DE, the prime lens looks sharper. This looks just sharper. You know, the prime is a little sharper, which is pretty cool, and it should be, especially at the price that it is. So yeah, pretty soft here. If we look in the center, now if we want to look in the center, let's cut this in half. Let's look at the center here. So let's just go down to that, and then we can move this over. So if we look at the center, this one here is the prime over here, and this one is the zoom. And you can see that the wide open at f1.4 it's getting close. I mean, the center actually looks pretty darn close, which is amazing. Now we're seeing a lot of chromatic aberration here in the center on the prime lens, where the zoom looks the zoom looks sharper now here in the center, which is absolutely amazing to me. No chromatic aberration, or no chromatic aberration on the zoom. A lot's over here and on the prime, and it's actually sharper over here. Even if we look at this B&H, the zoom lens, guys, this is the zoom lens is sharper than the prime. Now I know f2.8, f1.4, and we're gonna stop this down and check, but if you're just going to shoot either lens wide open, the zoom lens is going to be sharper. It's the same in the corners here. I don't even know if I want to waste my time. I think. Now the zoom looks sharper actually in that corner, and now the prime looks a little sharper. So it's kind of over the board, but in the center the zoom is sharper. So that's all good. Let's go to the 16 millimeter at f2.8. So then we're on a more of an even playing ground here. So if we look at the corner here, we already seen the zoom at 2.8. If we look at the prime, it is sharper, even at both at f2.8. sharper. If we get into the 4, yeah, the prime is much sharper than that. If we come over here, same with this corner pretty much. A little closer, but the prime is still sharper when these are both at f2.8. Now let's look at the center of this thing. This is the zoom and this is the prime. It still looks like the zoom is sharper. I mean, that's pretty incredible. Or if it's not sharper, it's really close, which is, I'm looking at the 8 here. This looks a little blurrier now here. But man, it's really close, which is just astounding to have a zoom as sharp as a, like when you're pixel peeping this ridiculously stupid, it doesn't even matter at this point. But I would say the zoom is sharper in the center portion than the freaking prime lens. And if it's not, it's just so close, like I can't even tell. The corners are definitely for the prime, but that zoom, I'm telling you, looks pretty darn good. Let's go to f5.6 now. So now over here is the zoom lens at 16 millimeters still at f5.6, and here's the 16 millimeter prime at f5.6. And if we go in here, if we go to 100%, here's 100%. We could see that the prime lens is always beating it in the corners quite clearly, as we could see. If we come on this side, prime beating it again over there. If the corner sharpness is a must-have, then the prime lens is going to be better than this zoom, even at the same apertures. If we cut this in half, and we come in here and look, this is the astounding thing: is the zoom lens in the center, like in the big center. I'm not talking about just this little center. I mean, a big circle center of the zoom is just as sharp as this prime, no matter where you put this. I mean, it's quite amazing. You can't even tell the difference, and that's pretty shocking when you're thinking about a prime versus a zoom. This is 100%, and they look almost identical. Sometimes the zoom actually looks sharper, so that is incredible right there. Okay, so this is the sharpness test using I'm using this. I keep forgetting I'm using this to film myself. This is the Fujifilm 35mm f1.4, comparing it to a zoom lens. And I know maybe it doesn't make sense or whatever. I just like to see what my stuff is doing here. And let's go ahead and zoom in. First, we're going to show, and you can see that clearly, a zoom at f2.8 wide open is much, much sharper than the 35mm at f1.4, which, probably sounds right. But hey, that just shows you that this zoom is amazing at 35mm wide open. And I'm sure the same goes for over here. Oh yeah, well, I mean, look at that. That's just like Blur City on the prime and super sharp, tack sharp on that zoom. So pretty much, let's check the center. Yeah, the zoom is still sharper, there's just no question about that. Quite a bit sharper. This is pretty, look how blurry this is down here, and this is super sharp. Again, f1.4. So it's good enough for the f1.4. Let's move on to the equivalent of f2.8. In the corners, this is just the incredible, because that zoom lens wide open at f2.8 is sharper than a prime lens at f2.8. I mean, look at that. Look at that 3.2, 3.2, much sharper on the zoom. Just incredible. If we just come down here, it's usually the same story. Looks a little more similar down here. 3.2, 3.2. Yeah, the zoom is sharper. Let's go look at this corner. Yeah, the zoom is just way sharper. Way sharper, which is just incredible, because you figure you got a zoom, and you're gonna think that a prime, you're gonna think a prime is sharper, and it's just not, which is really pretty crazy. So if we cut this in half at 100%, center sharpness is pretty darn good now on this prime. You can see there they look pretty similar here, which again, we're talking, the zoom might even look a little sharper, especially with these blocks here. And in the center, it looks like there's the prime is more black, so it has a little more contrast on there. Other than that, it's still, ooh, it's hard. It's starting to hard to tell in the center, which is crazy because this is a freaking zoom, both wide open. On the corners, forget it. The zoom is way sharper than the prime, and in the center, it's nearly identical. So let's move on to f5.6. Doesn't look like much difference now. This is just incredible. I mean, this is a freaking zoom over here that's just as sharp, if not sharper, even in this corner than I would say the zoom is sharper. That's just crazy. Yeah, it's sharper. It's for sure sharper. Yeah, it's sharper. The zoom is sharper. That's just nuts. Let's look at this corner. I never look at the other corner because I don't care. It's just like real quick here. Yeah, the zoom is sharper. Yeah, so if we look at these blocks and these blocks, they look fairly similar. The sign here, I would say the zoom still looks maybe a tad sharper. This is just crazy, guys. Maybe, maybe not. I would say dead center, it always almost looks the same, but sometimes the zoom actually is the same or beats it. In the corners, hands down, the zoom gets it. So down here, it looks almost identical, but I would say, and you would never know this in real world situations, but the zoom is sharper. I mean, that's just stupid. Okay, next. Now we're going to go with the next lens, so give me a break. Okay, so now we're going to go with the 56mm f1.2, and again, we're going to compare the f1.2 wide open to the f2.8 of this bad boy at 55mm, so it's a millimeter difference, and then we're going to, just like the other ones, stop the prime, the 56mm prime down to f2.8, and then both of them at f5.6. And now these are all at 55mm. So let's give that a check. So as you can see, that 56mm f1.2 wide open at f1.2 is really soft, as you can tell. And I've done many tests with this lens, and not just this one, and it's just really soft. So if we move it, we can clearly see that the zoom is way sharper at f2.8. Of course, this is f1.2, so I'm not even going to go, we can't, I mean, look how blurry that is. If you just really got to see it, that's just like night and day, right? Okay, so let's just check out the center, because usually that's sharper to 100%. So here we can clearly see that the zoom lens at f2.8 wide open is much sharper even in the center than the 56mm wide open at f1.2. It's very fuzzy, just all over the place. It's like no contest. Now this is a very noticeable, sometimes hard to tell, it's just very noticeable. So let's get out of that f1.2, and now we're going to go into the 56mm at f2.8. So now they're on the same playing field, is that how you say it? Here we are at 100%, and let me tell you something. This 56mm at f2.8, and now, remember, that's not wide open no more. That's several stops getting, when you have, whatever lens you have, the more you stop down, the sharper it gets. So this 56mm is at f2.8, which is stopped down, stopped down more than the f1.2, but the zoom, on the other hand, is at its widest aperture, which is incredible because it's sharper than the 56. I mean, it's sharper than the 56. Hello? It's close, but this is sharper. That just blows me away that this zoom lens is sharper than these primes, guys. I mean, who'd have thunk, right? And if we look at this corner, same thing. It looks a little closer. No, the zoom still looks closer. If we look at the center, 100%, we can see that they're on a really close, I mean, they look almost identical. If I look at that 9 and the 8, these boxes here, they actually look a little more crisp here. I just can't imagine that be the case, but this all looks kind of the same here. This looks the same. It looks really close to the same. It's one of those things where this might be a little sharper here, but we're talking about a zoom to a prime. Down here, it looks almost identical, but I would still say that the zoom is sharper. And it's one of those things where it's hardly noticeable, but I still think the zoom is sharper. And just to prove that that's the zoom, look, it's just crazy. So now these are both, 56 millimeter, 55 millimeter at f/5.6. We can see at 100%. Oh my gosh, it's just ridiculous. The zoom lens, this zoom lens is beating out prime lenses or tying them so close in the center that I can't tell. The only thing I've seen that gave it trouble was the 16 millimeter prime lens in the corners. Other lenses sometimes in the corner, maybe a little sharp or whatever, but can you believe that? I'm going out of focus. That's ridiculous. Let's go look at that again. So look at that. Just incredible for a zoom lens. Let's look over here. Now either I got like all bad copies of all these primes, or I got like an exceptionally great copy of the zoom. But look at that. The zoom lens over here is sharper, and I'll prove that by turning it off. Look at that. The zoom lens is sharper. What about the center? So here we are. The zoom was over here by proving that. Boom, at f/5.6. And the 56 millimeter here at f/5.6. Well, you're seeing the bottom one is right there. And look at that. I would say maybe the prime lens is finally, maybe, but every time I say it, maybe sharper. But this is stupid pixel peeping that, whatever. But, man, look at that. I mean, this is the zoom lens also in the center down here is beating that prime lens. And I would say these boxes are more crispy and sharp than these boxes over here. That's incredible. Okay, let's go to the next lens. All right, so you have to excuse my sinuses. It's very humid and I'm starting to get clogged up here. This is going to be that kit lens. Now, a lot of people ask, which one's better, the 18 to 55 2.8 to f4 kit lens or the 16 to 55 millimeter f2.8 amazing lens. Which one's better? Well, this one is, but let's go find out. There are a couple little surprising details here. Let me show you that. So what we're looking at here is this one that just turned off right here is the kit lens. I'm just going to call it the kit lens. Wide open at 18 millimeters, and over here, the 16 to 55 zoom lens is at 16 millimeters, both at f2.8. That's their widest aperture. And it's funny because this kit lens is actually sharper in the corner. That is a miracle. Look at that. That's the 18 millimeter. Of course, it's not 16 millimeter, but it is sharper. That is really, really cool. Now I'm curious. We have to go down here and look. Down here, it looks like the 16 to 55 is probably sharper. So it got, the kit lens got lucky up there in that corner. Let's check this out. I would say it's actually sharper. The kit lens is sharper in the top corners. That's pretty amazing. Down here, it is a little sharper. Yeah, that's pretty crazy. The kit lens is sharper than that one on the corners, at least the top, all the corners but that one, but who cares? So if we look at the center, now, the 16 to 55 just killed the kit lens. Look at that. It's like, that's like really, really soft over here, like almost blurry soft. These, yeah, it just killed it right there. The corners, though, it was sharper, but who cares about that, right? Yeah, it kills it. I mean, look at that. That's pure, crisp, and sharp, and this is quite fuzzy. So let's just move on to the next aperture, and I have this one. So these are both at f/5.6 now. And we can see that, same thing, this corner is pretty good on that kit lens, because it actually looks sharper than that. And that's kind of a common thing to get different sharpening around the lens. On this side, though, the kit lens, it's similar, but I would say the kit lens still beats it in the corners, even at f/5.6 at 18 millimeters opposed to this one. That's pretty cool. Pretty close. Maybe the 16 to 55 f2.8 lens is a little sharper now. And let's check that middle out. It doesn't kill it this time though, but it is sharper. The 16 to 55 f2.8 lens is sharper. Noticeably sharper, doing stupid pixel peeping like this. Even more noticeable down here. It's quite a bit blurrier down here, softer, but not too bad. Not too bad, but the zoom, it doesn't beat that 16 to 55. So let's go to the next one, which would be, okay, here we have the kit lens. Now both of these lenses are zoomed into or out to 35 millimeters. This is the f2.8 lens over here, wide open at f2.8, and because the kit lens starts to close down, it actually closed down to a 3.6 at the 35 millimeter mark. So if we zoom this at 100%, just like always, the kit lens is always sharper than this one in this upper left corner. Now your lens might be off a little bit, and it might, who knows, your one of your other corners might be better or worse, but the kit lens is beating the corner over there all the time. And same with down here. Again, this is wide open at f2.8 and this is 3.5 at 35 millimeters. But the kit lens, both corners beat the more expensive lens. If we go in this corner, it's a different story all the time. The f2.8 is sharper in this corner. That's just the way it's been going. These look really close as I move down here. It's really close, but maybe the if I had to guess and I just have to choose one, I would say the kit lens. So let's go to, so the center is always, the f2.8 zoom lens, the more expensive one, is always beating this in the center. I mean, like always is sharp. But it's not, you know, it's soft, but it's not that bad, right? Of course, your bokeh is not going to be the same because we're at f2.8 and 3.6, but it's not terrible. Some of those primes were actually worse for some weird reason, but not bad. But it's softer. The f2.8 lens is beating it. Let's move on quick. So now we are at 35 millimeters, but at f5.6 on both lenses, and it looks like the f2.8 is finally beating it in this corner. And if we go all the way down, same with down here. I won't even go to the other corner. Let's just check the center here. The more expensive one is sharper, not by a whole lot, but it is sharper. This looks like a lot sharper here, and the more we go to the center, it's much sharper. Maybe not much sharper, but it is sharper than this one over the kit lens. Down here looks a lot sharper. So there are parts that just look a lot sharper than the kit, but you know, like this looks really fuzzy here, but these don't. It's pretty sharp here. This f2.8 one is really sharp. Okay, so here we are. The kit lens is over here. Now the kit lens at 55 millimeters is an f4, so it's wide open, and I just wanted to compare it with the 16 to 55 at f2.8 wide open, and it's pretty cool to know. Well, I don't know, it depends on which lens you like. I do like that f2.8 lens, but right here, both zoomed all the way out where I usually shoot portraits, and this is why this is important to me, is in the corner, the f2.8 is just quite a bit sharper. Maybe not, I wouldn't say quite a bit. It is sharper, maybe quite a bit, but not as bad as some of those primes, but it is sharper. Let's just go down here because this is curiosity since I shoot portraits. Looks a little more tied down here, a little more even. This 16-9 over here looks just a little sharper than the kit lens. Yeah, this is much sharper. This is the f2.8 lens. Yeah, it's sharper. All of these things, not terribly different. This one actually looks a little better, maybe. The kit lens maybe looks a little better right there. And here, that one looks sharper on the f2.8. Let's check out the center, which is Really important if you'd like to do portraits. Here it's quite soft at f4. Over here is just like tack, razor sharp. I mean, this is just as sharp as those primes in the center. This looks a little fuzzy to me. This looks super tack sharp. Same with these two sides. This looks a little hazy where this one doesn't. This looks really, really soft here on the kit lens, and this is the reason why I don't like the kit lens, because if I'm going to shoot a portrait, for one, I'm at f4, which is okay, like I said, in certain circumstances, but if you want low light or you want to have a little more background blur, you just can't achieve it here, and it's soft in the center. I'm more important about, I care more about that than anything. Now here it looks really soft on this at f4. And down here, this is the f2.8 is just absolutely razor sharp. Okay, so let's move on to the f5.6 version of all this. And both at f5.6, 100%. So as we look here, the f2.8 is sharper. Not by a whole lot though, so that's good. Down here, it's sharper over here when I look at that F. This is pretty soft on the kit over here. It's a little soft, but over here it's much softer. And what about down here? 2 and 2. This is more contrast, sharper. This has a little haze to it. And over here, pretty close, but this still looks a little sharper. That looks a little sharper. Not by a whole lot, though. Maybe, it's noticeable at this stupid pixel peeping level. These look a little less hazy, I guess, I would say. Same with that. Overall, this looks a little hazy, where this one does not. A little soft looking. It's close, but the more expensive lens is sharper. If I look at the 8, it's quite a bit sharper, but if you're not pixel peeping at 100%, you probably won't know at this point. These just look a little more soft, a little blurry, but not a whole bunch. I would say that the kit lens at f5.6, both lenses at f5.6 at 55mm, they both look pretty darn good. Just when I look overall, but this is ridiculous. You would never notice. So that's kind of cool, that if you do have the kit lens and you want to shoot a portrait at f5.6, like I told you I do for some of the fashion, that I could literally get away with this kit lens. So here we are at 100%, and that's, that excites me, just because I use that kit lens as the backup lens, so I know if I zoom in for a portrait at f5.6 at 55, that both of these look pretty similar. Look at that. Pretty cool, pretty cool. Okay, next lens. Okay, this next lens doesn't make any sense, comparing it to this, but I just wanted to see. I did a really good review like this between the Viltrox 85mm f1.8 versus the Fujifilm 90mm f2. Go check that out. The Viltrox is actually a pretty good lens for the money. If you can afford the Fuji 90mm, it does beat it in every category, but it's a good lens. You could get that and make beautiful photos. So I'm just comparing it with this, as if you didn't want to get the 90 and you wanted this to be your everything lens, what's the sharpness like using it at 55mm or 84mm full frame equivalent? How would this compare if you, of course that's 85, that's 100 and whatever that is. So it's not quite a good comparison, but I just wanted to see the sharpness. Is this going to be sharp enough? Is that sharp? Whatever. So let's just go check it out, even though it doesn't make no sense. And what we're looking at here is the Viltrox is on the left, like all the other lenses, and that is at f1.4. Did I say 1.8 or 1.4? It's f1.8, not f1.4. So you can see the Viltrox is really blurry on the corners. Yeah, just like really blurry. I'm not even going to look at the center, because really the Viltrox is blurry through the whole thing. Yeah, this looks almost like I need glasses because it looks so blurry. Whereas this one here at f2.8 zoomed all the way in what would I use if I had both of these lenses and I wanted a sharp image and I wanted to take a portrait shot? I would just use this zoom lens because I'm going to get a much sharper images on the model's eyes and all that stuff. So yeah, let's move on quickly to the next one, which would be, this is the Viltrox at f2.8. So now we're just like both wide open. The zoom lens still beats it in sharpness, like by a lot. You can just see it's by a whole lot. So let's just go look at the center. So again, the Viltrox over here is at f2.8. Okay, so the Viltrox is quite a lot softer, if that's even a word, and the zoom is like tack sharp at f2.8, both at f2.8. So if I had both lenses and I wanted to take a portrait at f2.8 and I wanted the sharpest image, well, I would definitely use the zoom. This is why I do not have the Viltrox anymore. Zoom in 100%. So here you can see even at f5.6, the Viltrox, I'm going to double check this just because I did this a while ago. Yep, f5.6. So here we are. So this is 85mm at f5.6, and this is the 16-55 at 55 at f5.6. You can see it's just a lot sharper. I don't even have to really test much on this, but if we just look at the center, and it's not as bad. So at f5.6, it sharpened up quite a bit. The 16-55 is still sharper, but not by a whole bunch. It is noticeably sharper, but now here's where I would be like, they almost look identical actually. Not too bad for the Viltrox on this one. There's that S and that S. Pretty good. So if you have the Viltrox or you want it, shooting at f5.6 is going to give you the same results as this. So in my opinion, I would just get this because it doesn't beat it in any way except that low light at f1.8. But like we spoke about low light, I would just use a flash because the image is going to be much sharper with this one. And unless you have to increase the ISO, but even so, it'll probably still be sharper. And then you've got, 24mm equivalent all the way up to 84mm equivalent, and it's just everything sharper. Only when we zoom out at f5.6 do they look similar. So, yeah, let's go on to the next test. That's the sharpness test, guys. I don't know how much you got bored on that, but we're going to check the next test. So I had two more tests, and that is using this on the X-T3 on how it performed during light like this. I wouldn't consider this low light. I have everything well lit in stills mode, and then I did another one at night when I didn't have all these lights on and just the main light here, which is kind of gloomy and doomy. And then I did that low light test, and I'm not even going to show it because it's going to be a waste of time. It just worked great. I mean, whether I was at at 16 or 55, it just click, click, click. It clicked on everything. I mean, I don't know if it's faster than a Nikon or a Canon or a Sony or whatever, but within the realm of Fuji, it's one of the best, fastest focusing lenses I've had. The only one that might come close to it, or I didn't notice, is the Fujifilm 90mm f2. That's pretty quick, but I felt like this one might have just didn't miss focus as much, although neither one of them really did. But it's just not, it's a waste of time. I'd never had the 80mm macro, which they said that's faster, but although it's faster, is it better in low light? I don't know. But there's just no issues with it. It works great. So I'm going to spare you guys time on that. The other test I would do, that I'm going to show it because some of you might be interested in that, but I'm putting it here at the end. So if you don't want to watch it, then don't watch it. But it's going to be a test of the continuous autofocus with this on the X-T3. And like my other test, I basically jump up and down in front of it and let it focus and do all of its stuff. The other test I did with it, just like the stills test, I just put it on continuous autofocus, and I just showed, pointed it at things in my disc in low light and in good light, just like that stills test. And it worked great. I mean, it focused on, it didn't really hunt or nothing. I mean, it actually just worked great. So I'm not even going to waste your time on that. But I will show you guys like a vlog type style where I'm just here and watch it focus. I'm actually in this chair moving around so you guys can see how it focuses, and then I take it downstairs and I walk back and forth in and out of frame. Okay, just in case you guys don't want to watch all of the continuous autofocus in video mode, me going in and out, up and down, my final thoughts on this lens is it has become my favorite Fujifilm lens. You know, the 90mm I would say is way better than this in everything. It's just sharper, contrast. I like the compression of that 135mm full frame equivalent. There's a lot that I like about the 90, but out of all the 19 or 20 lenses that I've had now, this is the one that I always take with me. This is the one I always have on the camera. Like I was doing some landscape photography just the other day, and I had the 55-200, I had the 16-55, and I had I don't have it here, it's somewhere else, the 12mm Rokinon f2, and I put them all on, but I said I took them all off and I just added this on and just started shooting with this because, for one, it's sharper than those two, and I was doing some wide shots, and then I zoomed in for picking things out. So out of all the Fuji lenses, really, this is the one lens that I feel is the best for, you know, like I said, it's not sharper than the 90, but it's best because I use it the most. So if you guys ever think about getting this, hopefully this video shows you that it beats some of the primes. It's sharper than this almost everywhere except that left corner. It seemed to be a little soft. So it's kind of like whatever. Now you see the size and the price difference, image stabilization, no image stabilization, but it's a good backup lens. But as we showed you, if I zoom this in at f4, well, zoom it in at 55mm wide open, they look pretty similar. I'm going to do more tests on my own on that because that's pretty cool. At shooting at f5.6, not wide open. Both at f5.6 zoom in, that's incredible. So I'm going to look further into that. But that's my final thoughts. This is my favorite Fujifilm lens. It's weather sealed and it does everything. I mean, I could say 100% of my work, but there's always that time you want to do a macro shot or you want to get something far off or get real good compression, something you might not have to have, but kind of nice to have. So I would say 99% of my photography I can do with this and video. So anyway, I'm going to play that right now. And if you're going to stop the video here, please subscribe, give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate it. And I do love to talk to you guys in the chat. You guys are just not numbers to me. You are real people. And I love to see, sometimes I remember you guys when you come back. Sometimes I don't because there's so many weird names in YouTube. But I see repeats, people that are repeats coming back, and I enjoy it. So give me a thumbs up, subscribe, and watch the rest of this video if you care about continuous autofocus. Goodbye. In this test, we got the 16-55mm f2.8 again, and we are testing the autofocus with this because, like in my other videos where I was testing the prime lenses, the f1.4, I clearly knew that those weren't made for video. I clearly knew they were photography. I do also know that those f1.4s aren't as fast as the f2s. I think I said that in the video. If not, I'm stating that now because I had a lot of comments saying, you're using the wrong lens for video. I like to test my equipment regardless of what it is. I want to see, is it capable? So just relax there. I got some people like so mad at me that I was using those for video. It's just testing out my gear, and I do know the f2s are faster. So in this video, further testing the 16-55mm f2.8. As usual, it is much faster than the f1.4 lenses. I've got my Christmas lights up there just to see if we see pulsing, because you can notice pulsing with point lights or smaller lights rather than bigger lights like the ones on the side. So I'm just talking here to see if we see any pulsing. And the settings I got on here, it depends on what you're doing. Now, the Sony a7 III is nice because it's almost like you don't have to do anything. It just knows it works no matter what. You just hit record, get in front of it, and do whatever you want. With the Fuji, you do have to set it up properly. Like in this situation, I don't necessarily need to use eye or face tracking. I have the box right in front of me because I know the video that I'm going to be doing as of right now is me sitting in front of the camera. So it's going to give this camera a better chance to grab focus by me sitting here. If I were to do a video like I did in the other test where I'm walking around and in and out, or if I were to basically do one of those stand-up type of recordings for whatever, and I want to come around in the front, I don't know exactly maybe where I'm going to stand, and I might stand over here on one shot and one over here on one shot. So there would be nice for the eye or the face continuous autofocus. Now, I don't necessarily see that the eye autofocus is necessary when you're using an f2.8 lens, because if it focuses anywhere on my face, I'm going to be sharp. So in this situation, we've got the focus box right in the center, and I have the tracking and the speed set to 0, just whatever the middle is. I think it's 0. So 0, 0. So it should go in and out fairly fast, but soft and not too jerky. So just to test that out, we can hold up, something here to see how that works. This is the Fuji X-H1 with the Viltrox 85mm f1.8. So you can see it's focused on there pretty good. And now if we come back to my face, it comes back to my face. So that's the thing with the Fuji cameras, you just have to set it up for how you're going to shoot. And if that's if that bothers you, then the A7 III by far will be a better option, or any of those Sony A7 cameras. A7 III is the one I had, and it was an amazing camera. You do not have to know what setting you're in. You just press record and go. So if I'm going to sit here and do most of my videos like this, I'm going to set the camera up like I have it now, and I probably won't change it. If I do a YouTube video or something out, well, then all I have to do is change it to face track and maybe put the, the track on locked on. That way if people are walking in the background or something, it won't jump to them as quick. And that's about it. So how do you guys think that's working so far, if I wanted to show that? I never use continuous autofocus, but for stuff like this, when you want to show a product, when you're doing a review or something, you could do this, which is kind of cool. I'm looking at myself and not in the camera there. So it's kind of cool to be able to look at this. This is cool. The XH1 has, where's the X-rated? Has a screen on it. I don't know if you guys, there it is. Kind of cool. So yeah, 85mm. So yeah, I am actually testing that lens out. We'll try it. So I kind of rambled on a little bit on this test because I just want to give it time to see if it's going in and out while I'm talking here. So now we are on area, trying to see if that works or not. Got all this garbage from testing. So yeah, I want to look at the monitor so bad. Does that screw it up? Cover my face. See, it can't find a face, so now it does. And by the way, I do not have eye tracking. I don't see the need to use eye tracking when you have an f2.8 lens where the depth of field isn't that steep, especially at 24mm. Is it working? I don't know. I'll have to check this out later. Check it out. I might be moving too quick too. Yepper, skipper. Who knows? I can't tell. So that is the same test as last time, but with multi on instead of area as far as the focus point is concerned. Over here. And I mean, if you're sitting here talking, is this adequate for you? Yeah. Now, with that said, I would never use continuous autofocus in a professional video. When I'm doing commercials or short films, I'm going to use, focus pullers, to pull the focus. So I don't use that, but for, stuff like this, is it pretty good? You know what? Let me take the camera off and then hold it like I was going to vlog. So let me do that real quick. I'm going to just do this uncut. Let's see, without killing anything here. Without pushing any buttons. Hey, there we go. Okay, so we're going to just try this here. If you were to vlog with this, now this is not perfectly set up because of course I have a big heavy monitor on top and everything, but just wanted to see if that's something we could do. And let's just see the autofocus while we're here. Da-da-da. Over here in the corner, blah, 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 blah. See the crooked photos up there? Those have been there for a long time. Time to replace those bad boys. So if you're just vlogging like this and you're walking around with this Fuji X-T3 and the 16 to 55 millimeter at f2.8, and right now I'm at 16 millimeters at f2.8, and you can see if the, you know, if that is good enough for you or not. Okay, so if you sat through all those this whole long video and me jump in that last test of jumping in and out, I just want to thank you for watching the video. I already signed off before that, just in case some of you guys wanted to bail. If you hung out here to the end, thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys being here. I really, really, really do. I mean, how much more can I express that? I don't know, but I do appreciate you guys. So if you didn't subscribe, subscribe. I've got more videos coming up. I'm going to start getting into some landscape stuff and astrophotography, which I never did before. Let's see how that turns out. And yeah, let me know what you guys think about this lens. Do you use it? If you were are you debating on getting it? Let me know. Talk to you guys later.